Welcome to Around the 412. We are part of allsteelers.com and proudly presented by Crowworthy, where winners are serving winners coast to coast with sports, gambling, fantasy, and more. You can follow us at Crowworthy Takes on Twitter, and you can visit us at crowworthy.com. Messed up a little bit. You can also check out the Crowworthy Pittsburgh City page for podcasts just like this one, blogs, and more. I'm Tyler, and with me as always is Smitty. Today, we are joined by Pittsburgh Penguins writer from The Athletic, Jesse Marshall, our good friend. What's going on, man?
Not much, man. It's exciting times in the hockey world.
It is.
To say the least. Yeah, Tyler, you stumbled a little bit on that intro there, but everybody knows it's just one take. So,
listen, I was trying to look away from my phone for the intro, and you messed up on the outro a couple of times, so I can't. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yeah, but I guess we got a lot of stuff to talk about. There's a lot of stuff going on in hockey, so let's just get right into it. But first, before we get into anything Penguins, I wanted to bring up something that actually happened yesterday with Luke Prokop being the first active NHL player or active NHL contracted player to come out as gay. So I wanted to say, Jesse, what do you think that this does for not just the NHL, but how does this affect the game of hockey in and of itself? Because I feel like this is a bigger moment than probably a lot of people realize.
Yeah, I don't think it affects the game. I think it affects the culture of the game. I think it affects other players that are in a similar position to Luke, and now get a little bit of that empowerment to come out and share their story and be true to themselves as well. Not an easy decision that he made. I think that overall it was actually I think culturally, as a just straight regular dude, I'm kind of pleased to see the response though. A lot of other players are super supportive.
Yeah.
A lot of teams are super supportive. It seemed like, there was a really positive community response, and there was ugliness. You're going to have ugliness. I think I really just got drowned out. I think a lot of people did a good job of just ignoring it, tucking it away. Just don't even give it the time. But it was just a good day for the sport yesterday. For me, it was a landmark moment for a ton of different reasons, and you hope anyway that other players and that are in that similar situation now have that maybe a little bit more confidence to come out and speak.
Yeah, I listened to your show that you did with Eddie and Chad last week, I believe, and you guys talked about the minorities in the game of hockey, and I think this kind of goes hand in hand with that, just spreading the game towards everybody. Hockey is and not just hockey, just sports in general. I think you guys said on that show, there's a certain gatekeeping that happens towards certain sports, and hockey specifically, there is gatekeeping for very, I feel like, traditionalist views towards the sport of hockey. And I think the more that we see this, it's just going to expand to, and it shows anybody that can play, and you don't have to look a certain way or be a certain type of person. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, this sport is really bad at listening. It's not good at it. You even take it to a non-cultural piece for a second and just discuss analytics. That's counting things in hockey shouldn't be controversial. Just you're counting them. These things happened. Here's the sum total of them. What's hot about that take? But here you have this cultural pushback against that. And I kind of feel like accessibility to the game is in that boat. And I think that just listening to people. I shared this conversation before with several other people, but it was so eye-opening to me that I've kind of been repeating it ad nauseum now in an effort maybe to change it if I can. I don't know. But, I had a conversation with Chris. We all know him from hockey Twitter at YOLO Pinato, DJ Bodega Cat. He did a study of players of color in the National Hockey League. No centers. None. And I asked him the question. I said, is this a perception that from a young age these players aren't, and he stopped me. He goes, yeah, hockey IQ. They don't have the hockey IQ to play center, which is the toughest position in hockey, and it is. But just the little things like that that's something I never would have learned if I just didn't listen. And I think the NHL leadership I'm no perfect human, but I just don't think they have an open ear most of the time, and I don't think they're looking for these nuggets of information and ways to make the game more accessible.
Yeah. And that's a good way to tie those two things in together, because like you said, whether it's for not understanding and or unwillingness to understand and listen, that definitely all ties in together with, the hockey culture and again, that's the bigger picture thing that's more important, but also when you talk about analytics of the game as well. So
And here's
this
the
was a
thing,
big day.
too. Like last comment on this, you don't have to take my word for it. You can go back 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when the Toronto, I believe it was either the Globe or Mail or the Sun leaked the commissioner and disciplinary league emails, and you were reading threads where the commissioner and Gregory Campbell and all these guys are talking about how they didn't want to penalize certain players because so and so's not tough enough and sold it, or it wasn't about the intent of the situation or the hit or the check itself. It was about, well, there was this peripheral of, we didn't like that this guy sold it a little too much and he didn't get up quick enough. And are you kidding me? Like, what other sport is having these conversations? Like, give me a break. It's just that old school, Broad Street mentality, and that's, not necessarily a shot at Philadelphia, but you get where I'm coming from. Like, that era of hockey is still embedded in a lot of places, and that's not the game anymore. It's just not. And but we still, unfortunately, I think, have leadership that still has those kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
Anytime I think of that.
Go ahead.
Anytime I think of that area of hockey, all I think of is Don Cherry and some of the stupid stuff that he would say over the years.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that he's off coach's corner, but
it seems so innocuous, right? Like stuff like that. It seems so innocuous, but like it's the reason why people will undoubtedly, and this isn't a shot at like anyone in particular, but undoubtedly multiple someones will write a draft report this weekend about a Russian and include a bunch of nonsense crap that doesn't exist in their game, but is nothing more than a stereotype that's been handed down over generation over generation over generation, that will mar somebody's, public perception. And it's easy to do that. He's Russian. Maybe he doesn't want to play in the NHL. Probably isn't very physical. Maybe not good defensively. Pick one. We've heard all those things about Evgeny Malkin, right? I mean, like, people they get confused maybe sometimes as to why people get upset when personalities say the things they do, but those things perpetuate these just asinine takes about European players and players of color, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's sooner or later we have to get over this stuff.
Yeah. You actually mentioned Malkin, and one of the reasons that my friends and I have discussed before of why we thought he was left off the top 100 players is because he was Russian.
I have no doubt about it. No doubt about it. I think at the time I said, if his name was like Gene Smith and he was from like Saskatchewan or Moose Jaw, he's 100. He might be in the top 10 at that point.
Well, anyway.
I just wanted to circle back because I mean, not to tie this into this, we are talking about hockey. Jesse's on, of course, to talk about hockey, but to go back to the original point of this discussion, big shout out to Luke Prokop for coming out. Don't know if it had anything to do with Carl Nassib in the NFL doing that just a little bit prior, but maybe that gave him the confidence to do so. But again, like, it would just be anybody that's in a similar position to see somebody in that spotlight come out and do this. It just opens the doors for them to do the same thing and have the strength and confidence to do so. So that's just great to see.
And think about this too, and it's an important topic, so it's good that we keep talking about it. But like, we have read some brutally heinous things out of junior hockey and hazing. Right?
Yeah.
And like, you just can't help but wonder how many kids did Luke save yesterday by coming out and saying what he did and doing what he did. Like, is that a trickle down? Like, are we going to see that go all the way into junior hockey? Are we going to see some of this obscene, ridiculous stuff that takes place on buses finally stop? Like, I that's what I was thinking about yesterday, and I hope that is the case. I mean, that would be, to me, a bonus out of just him kind of sharing this awesome personal moment. There's potentially more to be born out of that that's positive.
Yeah, you just hope it's not like a short-term thing where everybody claps their hands and says, "Great job, Luke," but then actually in the big picture doesn't care about it. Yeah. So definitely needs to continue. But go ahead, Tyler.
Well, I was just say, hopefully this just continues to move the game forward in the right direction. But good for Luke. But now I think it's time that we get into the Pens talk, because we do have a lot to talk about. And we might as well just go back to, I guess it was last Friday. Jared McCann is traded to Toronto for Philip Hollander and a 7th-round pick. What was your immediate reaction to seeing that?
I didn't understand it, I don't think, completely. I guess I'd probably resigned myself, I think, to McCann being the one that got selected if he'd not gotten protected. And I think the signs, when it kind of looked like Jeff Carter was going to be getting protected, you kind of started to get the sense that maybe McCann might be that odd man out. Beluga gets signed. The writing was kind of on the wall. But now you kind of lose two players, right? So you lose Jared McCann. I'm a mark for Philip Hollander. I'm probably the biggest Philip Hollander mark in Pittsburgh, and you guys will probably remember I was really mad when they traded him.
Yeah, I mean, I saw you say today that you think that he's their top prospect.
Yeah, I don't even think that's close. Not even close. And like Patrick Bacon, who has an amazing NHL equivalency model that like tries to take junior or collegiate scoring and extrapolate it to future NHL success, his model doesn't think it's particularly close either, to the tune of like 50+% of like of surefire going to play in the NHL, like play 200 meaningful games. I think Nathan Leggery's kind of sunk down below 10%. Sam Poulin about 26, and Philip Hollander's close to 60. So, and then there's other separate star level evaluation that goes in. I just think that it's a very safe type of a game that he plays. It's very Patrick Hornquist without the sort of insanity that he had. Like that's sort of like I'm gonna fight everyone on the other team and sniff salts on the bench and like yell screams, to fire everyone up. Take that out and add probably like a touch more individual skill than Hornquist had, like a little bit more of a dangle ability, a better shot, and that's the player you get. So the fact that he's coming from European ice to North American ice doesn't bug me at all because he already is playing a North American game over there. Whereas I think like that adjustment for Valtteri Puustinen when he arrives will probably be a little bit larger because he doesn't really play that way. But I think the reality is, and people laugh at this, right? Like they think this is a joke, but like legitimately, Jared McCann, from a play driving perspective, microstat perspective, carries, entries, shots off the rush, literally was one of the best forwards in the National Hockey League last year, utility wise.
Yeah.
I'm not entertaining any debates to the contrary, right? Like, so the question is, can he repeat that? I don't think so. Like a guy like Jay Fresh, who I have a lot of respect for, will tell you there was some smoke and mirrors to that, right? Like a shooting percentage is one of the things that was kind of up, but I still feel like you could have maybe recouped a little bit more. Like that 7th rounder in 2023 ain't moving the needle for me much, And like I get it, you got something back, right? So there's something to be said for that, but you're gonna lose another player now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that was the plan. Maybe this is you're trying to clear space. You want to open up cap room. Maybe this was procedural in the sense that Jared McCann's due for a raise, and like I think the Twins at Evolving Hockey had him north of $5.5 million. You can't pay that, So there's that's element to it as well. But I think what a hindsight will look back on this trade. It will end up being what happened with the space that they create. Like, what do they do with this cap money? That is ultimately now, I think, the big question.
I feel a lot better about it if Seattle was going to take McCann from Toronto, but if that video that leaked today is any indication,
the fish video, the infamous fish video,
it won't be.
Let me just comment on that real quick, because there's no possible way that they took every single unprotected player and shot a fish video. Like, there's no way that they did that many takes.
I mean, is that how they're all being done? Is like that, or was that just like specifically?
Your guess is as good as mine. Yeah, I have no idea. I know that there's like certain special Seattle people that are like doing announcements and stuff like that too, but can't ever trust the fish.
No, I think that was legit.
Me too, 100%. Yeah, that would be crazy though. Like logistically, that does not a move that makes sense. Like if you're Toronto, they're like I don't want to like trash Kerfoot. Like he's a decent player, but like Jared McCann's way better. That would be bizarre to me.
We're not here to talk about Toronto, but would you have done the same thing as them, 4-4, or would you have gone with the 7-3 and not worried about one of Hall or Brody?
I would have protected Jared McCann over Hall every time. Yeah. I don't know what it is that fit. This is like where I get into arguments with people like Pierre McGuire, who says like, "Oh, the analytical darling, the Toronto Maple Leafs." What moves are they making that scream analytically savvy to you? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, they've done nothing that says to me like that this is an analytically inclined franchise.
Trading for Foligno, like signing Wayne Simmons.
Yeah,
those are all analytical moves.
So we can just throw this in that bucket. But I don't know. We'll see. Maybe there's 2 videos for them. Maybe there's a McCann one with an octopus that we don't know about or something like that.
I mean, well, just like you said, that you would have protected McCann if you're Toronto. If I'm Pittsburgh, I would have protected McCann. It literally made no sense to me why everybody was entertaining protecting other like he should have been after the top 4 plus Kapanen. He is my 6th guy that I'm protecting, and it was no question about it.
Kind of look at like the stages of grieving through this process. Like we actually, I think the 3 of us on Twitter had a discussion about this at one point where I think I told you guys the good news was they couldn't take all of Bluger, Aston Reese, and Tanev.
Yeah.
Now it's like, wow, like how quickly has this changed that, like one of them got protected and the landscape's just totally adjusted. So I'm with you. He was on my list. That's the only way I could say. And I guess, for the Penguins, maybe they felt. Here's the other element that makes this confusing for me, is Jeff Carter gets protected, right?
Mm-hmm.
They feel like they need center depth. You're probably looking at a decent chunk of change for Malkin before he gets back. Jared McCann plays center, so I still don't like. He probably is a better left wing, I think. But
I agree.
Still plug him in. I mean, it just to me it was kind of in that sense, even in that scope of needing a center, it was kind of bizarre.
Yeah, and you mentioned Carter. Do we really think Seattle's going to take Carter? Like, I understand that they want to protect him because of the Malkin injury, but at least in my mind, I'm thinking Carter is 1 year left on his deal. He's 36 years old, and maybe differently, but I think he could just say, "I don't want to play in Seattle. I'll retire." So
why would he say that though? His family lives in LA.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, I don't know where the
last year of his deal still gets paid, right? Plays out the last year of his deal on the West Coast, closer to his family. I don't think he's turning that down. I think Jeff Carter wants to play in Pittsburgh. I think Jeff Carter wants to play and get paid in his final year of his deal. Where that occurs is probably inconsequential to him. So I don't think he would have retired, and I think the Penguins think he'd have gotten selected. And it kind of makes sense from a Kraken perspective because what he can accomplish based on the playoff run that he had last year and the kind of supporting play they gave you, and it's a 1-year commitment. So if you're bringing in all these prospects, you're going to make deals that guarantee you take certain players, and you feel like you've got some guys knocking on the door, maybe you have cap flexibility you could use later, that's a deal that you probably make because you get a really good center on a friendly contract at 1 year, and you could do whatever you want after that. I don't know that that's what the plan was, right? Like, I don't think anyone does, but I think the Penguins think that's what was going to happen.
Yeah. And I would have said the same thing as Tyler before. I don't know if you saw that excerpt from an article as well. I don't know what article it was from, but it was like Jeff Carter wouldn't decline like we had originally thought, going to play for Seattle because everybody was like, well, he can just threaten retirement. Doesn't seem like that would have been the case.
It's just a shorter, like I said, it puts him a little bit closer to home. And I don't think that's a deal breaker for him being in Pittsburgh in any way, shape, or form, right? Like, I think he's, again, very happy to play out for the Penguins, likes being here. But that element is something that you just can't discount. Like, I don't think he would have kind of shaken his head at that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, while we're talking about,
go ahead.
I was going to say while we're talking about the protection list, you mentioned your protection list. Did you have Teddy Bluger being protected?
No, I'm glad they did ultimately. I like Teddy Bluger. Like he's, I think he showed so many different things throughout the course of this year that really put him on a level above most of this roster on the IQ perspective. Sneaky stuff he can do as a center. Like he can play left wing in a pinch. I didn't expect it, but I'm happy to see him. I would have been pleased if he had not gotten selected by Seattle if he was unprotected. They probably would have grabbed him based on the fact that he's a center. So I think the Penguins are kind of just in a position where they wanted to make sure that didn't happen. And I look, at the end of the day, I don't know that we've yet scratched the surface on everything Teddy Bluger can do. Like he's still a relatively young player with a non-gross amount of NHL games under his belt. And I know that he's generally past the age where players like quote unquote peak. But a player like him and the sort of like, dare I say, refined style of hockey plays, a smart style of hockey plays, I think that just advances as he goes. So I still think there's more to come for him. I think it's a smart move.
Yeah, we had talked about him a lot, that he would have been protected for us. Now, granted, most of that conversation was prior to the acquisition of Jeff Carter. So, that kind of changed things. But for most of the time leading up to the expansion draft, we had Teddy Bluger as a lock to be protected too. Now, would I have protected him over a guy like Jared McCann? That's an interesting conversation. But
yeah. Yeah, I think there was even a time like where I was trying to drive the protect Teddy Bluger train. Wow, it's great. So we're all happy at the end. I'm just shocked. I mean, I just, it's when you consider who they didn't protect, right?
Yeah.
And like that's really where it becomes a shocking decision, I think. And there's an ice time conversation to have here, right? Like Jared McCann proves he can run a power play unit, right? Can come off the wall with a level of effectiveness, can take a good chunk of 5-on-5 minutes. You don't see Teddy Bluger with a lot of power play time. Granted, like penalty kill, yes, but I think his 5v5 minutes are generally a little bit less than McCann. So who's going to give you more bang, more impact? I don't know. But the Penguins did, guys. Here's the other thing. Jay Fresh's model, I think, had both the Twins and Jay Fresh, both their models had Bluger at over $3.5 million a year. So the Penguins are getting him at a severe discount for the services he provides, and I'm sure that that's something that's played a part in this decision.
Yeah, and you know what? For McCann, this is like it's funny to see. I mean, what you're talking about with the power play, like when Malkin came back, we're talking about all these fans that were saying McCann can't come off the power play. Who cares about Gino? You can't just throw him back on there just because he's Gino. And then those same fans turn around and say that McCann's not a big loss for this team.
Yeah, I think yeah, and I think like some of it is a lack of what's the word I'm looking for? Like the analytical side is so favorable to Jared McCann because of the micro data, right? Like I mentioned on Twitter to a lot of people in Toronto that this year he took, in my opinion, a huge step forward with the amount of times he crossed the offensive blue line with possession of the puck, like on his stick, right? We could see this on video, right? This isn't, you go back and watch the game, you see the same thing happen. But this
Yeah.
is like these little tiny things he was doing aren't things that you talk about on the way home in the car. Like people aren't calling in a sports talk radio, like, did you see that zone entry by Jared McCann? So like I think it's easy to kind of like write a lot of it off or discount a lot of it and call it, dumb voodoo analytics because they're again, it's just not something that pops off the page to you. It's not like watching somebody get the stunner. It's more subtle stuff, and that's not a knock on people's eye test. It's just no eye test is capable of keeping track of all this crap over the course of 56, let alone 82 game season. So, I think there's probably that element to it a little bit, but I still don't. I still think even if Jared McCann took the slightest step back off of last year's performance, he's still a highly effective player.
Tyler, we weren't on the same page, by the way, in terms
of
the protected player. I was going to bring up, did you have any foresight that Mike Matheson would be protected?
That's actually what I was going to next. So
No, but I'm not surprised because and let's think about this, right? Like Nashville, for instance, is taking the gamble and dangling out these two superstar big time contracts in the hope that Ron Francis is going to like trip over himself to take one. He's not. Stupid. Like you're wasting it. They're going to take Calle Yarncroke. And now Nashville just lost like one of their better like younger two-way players is like a really good solid hockey player. And for what? So I think that the Penguins just weren't going to try it. There was no way that Ron Francis was taking on what a lot of people consider to be the worst contract in hockey. So in lieu of like gunning for that and hoping that you get lucky, I think it was, let's just bite the bullet on this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I just was, I guess, kind of surprised to see him protected. Not that I thought Francis would take him if he wasn't, but I don't know. Do you think that there's any way that he is movable? Like, what would it have to look like for them to move Matheson's contract? And would it be worth it? Because it's not like he's a terrible player for them.
Like Duncan Keith just got traded. Like
That's true.
So I mean, they like Rob Scuderi got moved. I mean, the problem is the term, right? Like that's really, you're gonna have to eat a lot of crap on it. You're probably gonna have to tuck some of that money under your belt to get somebody to do it. But no, I don't think it's impossible. I don't. I think that there are creative ways around it. Buying out Mike Matheson is not one of them. That would cost, be bankrupt after that. Shouts out to my cat, by the way. He's coming downstairs. Yeah. But anyway, no, I really don't. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's the sooner you do it, the better off you probably are, because you don't want to get into a situation where his game starts to decline, or something happens, he get hurt and comes back sub 20, or 25% of them missing. I think it's the time to try to do it is now. So I wouldn't be surprised if, Ron Hextall's probably already thought about that once or twice.
Well, that's what I was saying, because if you think about, like, so you don't think it's immovable, but is it worth trying to move if it means attaching other assets to or not getting a return? Because it's not like Mike Matheson is unplayable.
Yeah, and his returns last year were, they weren't bad. I mean, I think it was a rough start. He got hurt, came back, rebounded really well, and then I think what you got from that point on is kind of just what you're going to get all the time, which is a bit of a roller coaster, right? Probably more good than bad, but a little bit of a roller coaster with limitations on how you can deploy him. I just, I mean, to me, I still think, Smitty, that if you're going to do it, you have to do it sooner rather than later. I think that, especially considering, some of the stuff that he did last year that's on video, passing that puck off the boards to himself to score that goal, stuff like that. I mean, he's a well-known commodity from an offensive standpoint. I think the Penguins put him in a pretty decent spot to be able to prove that again last year. Again, I think it's one of those deals that it affords you so much space, right, and so much comfortability with the cap in the future that even if you have to kind of like eat a little bit of crap on it, it's okay and worth it.
Now, we're talking about Matheson being moved, but the other defenseman that makes a lot of money on the left side, do you think it's more likely that they could move on from Marcus Pettersson than Mike Matheson?
I think Pettersson's a piece that you try to move via trade. I don't think Seattle will take him, and I think that is just solely because he's so one-dimensional. He's good at what he does, really good, arguably, at what he does. But that one thing is just like playing defense and not letting people in the zone. That's great because it's the job of a defenseman. Like, I don't want to paint this in the wrong way. Like, you literally want your defenseman to do that. But he hasn't shown much else in the way of like generating offense, being an asset on the breakout. Like any other element than what he's proven himself to be adept at, I think is that lack of pops, we'll say, is what I think will preclude him from getting taken by Seattle.
See, do you think that that's different? Like his first year here, I felt like he did bring more to the table, and I don't know if you felt that way or if the analytics of that wouldn't match the eye test, but it just seemed to me like there was more to his game than just suppression that first year in Pittsburgh.
I kind of feel like we got I don't know if you guys will remember this, but back at the beginning of the year, there was that small stretch before he got hurt where he was like scoring lasers, right? Like he put one bar down early before his injury, was super active in the offensive zone, and a lot of people were on Twitter were like, "Ooh, wait, what happened? What happened? Like, did you get bit by a radioactive spider?" And then it kind of was like he got hurt, he came back, and you never saw that again. So that's anecdotal, small sample size, right? I think he's probably at the age where if we haven't gotten a lot of that yet, we're probably not going to. But again, like I want to be clear that if Marcus Pettersson is on the Penguins next year, I'm fine with that outcome. Like I know people are down on him, people poo-poo his game a lot, but like he is a very effective defenseman.
Listen, I'm a fan of him and Marino together. You don't got to sell me on keeping him.
I think a player of his ilk allows John Marino to be a little bit more advantageous offensively speaking, and that's what I think have all been looking for out of John Marino.
Do you think a guy like Brian Burke does not like him just because he's too small and he gets beat up? Because I know Burke said he wanted to beefing up that blue line. So do you think that could be a reason that why they try to move on from him?
No, I think everyone that plays that position gets beat up. I mean, you're on puck retrievals, right? Like you have to have your head on a swivel. That just comes with the territory. I don't think he is any. I think where his struggle is that he's just not the guy pulling the trigger on the breakout most of the time, right? So if you have less touches on the puck than your partner, every mistake you make gets amplified and kills you on the data perspective. So I just feel like he's not the focal point. He's not really exhibited the desire to want to carry the puck across the red line himself. Which is, again, fine by me for a defenseman. So I just his wheelhouse, I think, is a little bit smaller than maybe we all thought it was.
Now, I don't think there's any surprise here either way, whether they would have protected Jari or DeSmith. But did you even think about it or second guess it when they protected Jari?
No, I think the reality is that anything the Penguins do, in the short term to try to clear space is to try to fix the goaltending scenario. I just don't think they're happy with it. I don't think they want to go into next season with Jari and DeSmith as their combo. Um, and I don't know what this looks like. I don't know how they do it. The free agent crop of goalies isn't particularly good. And I think you're going to have a bidding war around a lot of them. Like, you can price, forget it for Tuukka Rask, right? Like, no chance. Like, you're looking at, like, the shelf that Peter Mrazek and Linus Ullmark are on, right? But those prices are going to get driven up. There's going to be a bidding war for those players. Now, all of a sudden, like, you're paying like $5 million a year for Linus Ullmark, and that's no good, right? So I think the environment doesn't really lend itself to Ron Hextall going out and signing a goalie. I think that this, again, Marcus Pettersson is one. Tristan Jarry is one. I was having a conversation a couple of days ago with a buddy of mine who used to be a scout for the Stars, and he's telling me people like Jarry's reputation after that series is not damaged around the league, and that people like, haven't really scoffed at that performance like we have in Pittsburgh. So maybe he's the guy you deal. I don't know. I don't have no idea what that looks like, but I can't help but feel. I mean, where else is Ron Hextall going to swing this money around? And it's not going to be on D, right? I mean, I don't think you're going to go out and you go out and get a wing, right? There's no question about that, but I don't. You're not going out and getting a top tier $9 million a year wing, right? Like I just can't help but feel like he's 100% aware of what happened, what needs to be addressed, and I think that is the plan.
Do you think that? So I was all in on protecting DeSmith just because I always said since that playoff series, I just kind of had a bit of taste in my mouth, and I think that DeSmith is a great backup, and I like him for being a backup, so I would have protected him and left Jari exposed. But do you think they could have just protected Jari just to help his pride a little bit? Because I feel like if he's unprotected, maybe that just tears his confidence down even more.
No, I don't. I mean, I think that after everything that just happened in that playoff with him, I think I don't think he's in that position where he needs that. Like, I think that the one thing you could probably say about him is that when it comes to like the situation he's in, that all that is just ambivalent. Like, I think he's just ambivalent to all of it. I don't think he hears that stuff. I don't think it bothers him. So I don't think that vote of confidence like that would really give him much of a boost.
Yeah, I think,
and I also think to your point, about DeSmith, I don't think it would have made a difference because I think the path to goalie for the Kraken is like very much laid out. Like, I don't think it includes Carey Price. Chris Driggers on there. I think Capo Kakinen is a surefire bet for them. Even a guy like Vitek Vanacek, you could end up with a really competent starting goalie duo for under $2 million a year. So I think I don't think any plan that they have would have included Casey DeSmith.
So we've talked about who we protected. So now, who do you think Seattle is going to take from the Penguins? You said you didn't have an answer before the show, so I hope you came up with one now.
No, I mean, it's definitely down to the three forwards. The more I think my gut instinct right out of the gate was Brandon Tanev. It just seemed like to me, if you look kind of around at what Seattle is doing and the team that they have the potential to build and some of the players that got exposed, I think initially I thought that it would be Tanev, but now when I look at the pool of players they have to select from, I'm leaning towards either Zach Aston Reese or Jason Zucker. I don't, for me, I think the Zucker thing might be a buy low scenario. He had a really not great year last year, which was an anomaly for him. That was not the norm. He's normally much better than that. I thought he was going to score at a 40-goal pace last year. That's like, how crazy is that now? I still think that it might be a buy low scenario for them to try to get him on a rebound situation. But look, like, the analytical staff that Ron Hextall or that Ron Francis has over there is bar none. They're going to know that Zach Aston Reese is literally the standard bearer of defense in the National Hockey League today. He's in the 100th freaking percentile of even strength defense among forwards in the National Hockey League. I think he's probably as good as gone.
Okay.
But if it was Jason Zucker, I wouldn't be surprised.
He should threaten to retire.
Yeah.
I mean, I think even if you're looking at the contracts, Zach Aston-Reese, he's an RFA, but he's going to cost you like $1 million, $1.5 million. Meanwhile, Jason Zucker, he's got that 5.5 cap hit. Do you think that Seattle even cares about that cap hit? I mean, I know everybody like sees all these players that they have to bring in, but they still have to build a team under the cap. It's not like they can be taking all these top players that they could spend all this money on. They still have to build a team like everybody else.
Yeah, and they're gonna. I think, you know. Now I'm taking it back to the Zucker point real quick here, because I think that there are a lot of Zach Aston-Reeses and Brandon Taneves in this pool of players that they can select from, right? So maybe if you really feel like the team that they could assemble lacks top 6 pop, I mean, the argument would be that Jason Zucker can certainly provide you with that. Because otherwise, you know, there's the potential they get like Gabriel Landeskog, right? They negotiate with him, get him signed before he becomes a UFA. Great, awesome start, right? Jordan Eberle, great player. I think it's a slam dunk pick, easy selection for the top 6. Do they want JVR at $7 million? It's a lot of money, right? Like, okay, like maybe they take Jared McCann, but like he needs some help up there. Like I don't think he's driving the play by himself, right? All of a sudden, Jason Zucker sounds a lot better up there now, doesn't it? You've got, you know, players that you could fill that bottom 6 out. You know, we mentioned Calle Yarncroke. And there's going to Yanni Gord, you know, is another name that could be up there. But I mean, I just think that it's not out of the realm of possibility to take Zucker based on the fact that he does provide historically, not last year, but historically a little bit more pop than some of those other names do.
And I feel like if you're the Penguins, that would be best case scenario, is that they take Zucker, just because you get that money off the books and you suddenly have all this money that you can do stuff this summer to help improve your team.
$8.9 million, potentially more if you want to go out and get a goalie, Tyler. You take Marcus Pettersson and include him in the deal and knock another 4 off, right? Like, so there is options exist for Ron Hextall, I think, for sure. We're kind of like, I think right now in the frustrating part of judging like a very large process in part 1, right? So like, it's, you know, we don't really know what parts 2, 3, and 4 look like. So it's easy to be frustrated. I think, you know, maybe it's the case that like, no matter what parts 2, 3, and 4 look like, trading Jared McCann was still kind of silly. You know, I mean, maybe that we come back to the end of the process, maybe we all still feel that way, and that's fair. But I guess I'm always willing to see what happens next.
I mean, I guess this is a great segue, because talking about that process, free agency is coming up. So do you think the Penguins will be interested in any of these free agent goalies, any of the other free agent forwards on the market, or just making trades in general? Do you think the Penguins have eyes on any specific players or positions?
So here's the thing. I really mentioned the Allmark thing earlier today, right? But I really feel passionately about that. Like I like think that, you know, I said that more often than not, when it comes to the Penguins, you just need an average performance will give you a win, right? That's enough to get you over the hump. I think he could give you that, and at a somewhat potentially friendly cost, right? I think as far as, you know, some of these other names, like you're probably in a position where you've priced yourself out of, you know, some of the bigger names. I know that the popular one right now is Zach Hyman. I'm not really crazy about that. You know, what the production he just put up was at a career best rate, you know, right around the time his contract was up. You know, and I'm always like,
well,
you know,
here's the thing is everybody's like, let's not pay Brian Rust because he's getting close to 30. Zach Hyman's 29, right? I mean, so what's the difference in paying Brian Rust, you know, $5.5 million plus on a 5-year plus term deal, or paying that to Zach Hyman? I mean, if you don't want to do one, why would you do the other one?
Brandon Saad's 28, Michael Granlund's 29, Thomas Tatar's 30. All these names that like you kind of would throw around, like they're all kind of in that same boat, right? So like Barclay Goodrow, I mean, even Barclay Goodrow is like 28, you know, and he's not exactly what you'd refer to as a superstar.
And look at the contract that he got.
Right. So
which makes you even think, like, because there's a couple of names that were brought up with the Penguins, I know at least amongst the fan base, were like Blake Coleman, Thomas Tatar. If Barclay Goodrow got that contract that he did, what are the guys like that going to get?
So I still think that a lot of the business, for me, is going to have to be done by sacrificing a useful NHL roster piece, kind of somewhere else.
I think the biggest annoyance to me in the National Hockey League is that after you win a cup, your price just goes up. It doesn't even matter how significant you were to
Oh,
that
man.
cup run.
It's it's this mysterious superpower that can never be quantified or explained. And here's what I thought was cool. Like Jack Hahn, who I have a lot of respect for, and I think is like honestly probably the best video analyst in hockey, posted this video. And I'm like beating up on Duncan Keith this whole show, but this is not a Duncan Keith specific thing. This is just, you could paint this across with a broad stroke, specific to winning Stanley Cups. Like he posted this very, very intricate video of why Duncan Keith's data has been so unfriendly. And it's because he doesn't have his legs anymore. He can't keep a good gap, and he plays super deep. Right? So here's just video clip after video clip after video clip after video clip of all the same thing happening over and over and over again. And Jack basically saying, like, look, there's no mystery to this. This is all year long. This is what happens. And if you look at the replies to that video, so he won a goddamn cup. He won a cup. How dare you question? Like, are you guys? You're not watching the game anymore. Like, you just now you're appealing to authority. And it's, people will still say, like, look, say what you will about Patrick Hornquist, but like the Matheson trade, like looking back on it now, like even at the time it was rough, but people say that Jim Rutherford won those cups. You can't point that out. Like, you can. Like, these people are not infallible. Like they're human beings. They make mistakes. We live in this is not a black and white situation. There's varying levels to all of this. There's nuance that we're kind of missing out on. I think that that's one of those old adages that once you've won a cup, you suddenly bring this, like, honest to goodness. Let's think about this logistically, right? What is Duncan Keith going to say to Connor McDavid that's gonna like push him over the line? Like, what's the magical like sentence or two that you throw at the player who could literally do whatever he wants on the ice? Literally do whatever he wants, other than
especially against Duncan Keith.
Have penalties called against him is the one thing you can't do. You can't control that in the playoffs. But I don't understand what he does to that room, other than maybe make life a little bit more difficult on Ethan Bear. That's it.
I was like, he makes it slower and worse.
So it's just that's one of those old narrative pieces. Like, to get back to what we were talking about way at the beginning of the show, that's another one of those things that's got to die and go the way of the buffalo.
I think even with cups, not just the cups, the individual awards too. Like, I saw people saying, "Oh, he's a 2-time Norris Trophy." I'm like, "Yeah, you won them in like what 2009 and 2014 or something like that." Like,
they didn't give it out last year, Yeah,
we're talking about over a half decade ago. It's just stupid.
So, I mean, free agency is one thing, but as we've kind of alluded to, there's not much out there in terms of goaltending with that. So, if they were to acquire a goaltender, it probably has to come in a trade. We're talking about these, maybe a valuable piece that they have on the left side of the defense that you can use in a trade. I mean, where can the Penguins look at to try to find their goalie solution?
I have no way. And I have a feeling, to be completely honest with you, it would come from a source that we haven't even fathomed or thought of yet. I don't.
So it's not. So just tell me it's not Jonathan Quick. So
no. Maybe Jonathan Gibson. That would be acceptable. I would take that. But no, I don't think it's gonna come. Like, it's not gonna. You're not getting Carey Price here. Like, that's not gonna happen. Like, I think
Darcy Kemper.
I'd live with that.
He's only got like 1 year left on his deal. I've heard
reasonable,
his name be
right?
mentioned. Yeah,
I would take that. I mean, I haven't even really. I would take Freddie Anderson's one I would look at in free agency. Like,
okay, so he's been brought up quite a bit because Dan Kinderski, is who it was, linked him to the Penguins like immediately when the season ended. Yeah. Said that there's always kind of been some lukewarm interest, at least in him. So I don't know. Maybe that is a name to look at. But Tyler, you wrote that article and kind of wrote that idea off right away. So.
Well, just for me personally, maybe you can know the numbers differently than I do, and maybe playing in Toronto affected it, but I just feel like he's digressed the past few years, and I think it's gotten worse and worse. So it's like, if you have a big question mark in net when it comes to Tristan Jarry, why would your answer to that be
Tyler,
another question mark?
You can't
Yeah,
swing and miss on
exactly.
this. Yeah, you're just in this. You put yourself right back into the same boat.
Like if you're gonna replace Tristan Jarry, you better make a slam dunk. Otherwise, especially if you're paying more money, because then
but that's
you're gonna
guys
get
why
burned
I
for
don't
it.
think you could do it in free agency. I don't think that slam dunk exists outside of Peter Mrazek. Like that's probably the closest thing that you could get in free agency, unless you find, a way to go cap compliant like the Lightning did. Just maybe make Malkin sit out the whole year and then go sign Tuukka Rask. Maybe that, I don't know. Maybe that's it. I have no idea, but that's why I think it has to come via trade, because they have the pieces to do it. They have useful NHL talent that they can pull this off with, that also clears space for them. And I just don't think that they can. I don't think they can afford to get in a bidding war. I don't see that as feasible for them right now.
Just that's what I brought up with Jarry. Like, what the chances of Jarry not looking like the goalie we saw in the postseason and being a serviceable NHL goalie, I feel like are as good of the odds as you'll get from paying one of these guys in free agency and having them come in and be the solution.
I haven't written him off. I still think there's too much pedigree. And I always tell this story because I still think it's meaningful in some way. But the Penguins drafted him. He was not the starter, right? Like he wasn't even starting in Edmonton when they picked him. He'd only played like 14 games that year, and everybody saw those 14 games like, this is going to be pretty good. I think what stinks is that he's a hard guy to coach, and it's not because he's like a personality issue or he's stupid or anything. It's just he comes from a really bizarre background. His background is he and Laurent Brossoit, who is also in the NHL now, went to the same goaltending academy, and I think it's a academy that's very geometric based, not so much technique based. And I don't know, like, how do you, unless you go and get the guy that ran that academy, like you're gonna find somebody that fits that mold. Like these are questions that
Why haven't we? What's his name? Get him on the phone.
Yeah, I don't know either. But just stuff like that. I think that there's nuance that hasn't been met, and that's why when most people say like, "Well, I think the Penguins should move on from Mike Buckley." Try something else. That's fine with me. I just, I think if you're gonna keep Tristan Jarry, you're gonna make a commitment to keep him in your net next year. Maybe you trade Casey DeSmith, because it can't be both of them. You would at that point would have to, in my opinion, go out and get somebody that Tristan Jarry insurance, right? That if one, you don't want a repeat of that situation, and two, maybe you need somebody older to be around him.
You brought up Mike Buckley. Do you think that part of the problem could be him, just because we've seen with Tristan Jarry and Matt Murray back-to-back goalies where you have higher expectations and they're not met?
Matt Murray had the same struggle in Ottawa, Tyler. My response to everybody's comments about Mike Buckley has been, if it makes you feel better, do it. Like, I just don't think, to me, that that's the solution or really an impact on what's going on here. I would understand it if he got let go, but for all intents and purposes, what we know Mike Buckley is that, he's got a sterling reputation and did a lot of really good work with people that are no longer here. So, I also question how much of Casey DeSmith's above the line performance last year might have been a result of Mike Buckley, right? Like I don't know how we could separate out good results of Mike Buckley and bad results of Mike Buckley, because there's no way to parse that down, right? So to me, it's like, if you want to make the change, make it. I don't see it as being like a necessity or anything that's really going to change the landscape of this team.
Yeah, I think everybody's just looking for a scapegoat. And don't get me wrong, like, if you're looking for a change, that'd probably be like one of the first ones that I'd throw out.
Yeah.
Like, you're just looking to shake things up in some way. But, to your point, I really hadn't thought about the Smith thing, but that's valid.
I mean, so with this McCann thing, the trade, my trust in this front office has kind of not really wavered a little bit. It's just questionable, like, why are you doing this? So maybe there is a grand picture. But for me personally, if they go into next season and maybe they can't get anybody in free agency or a trade, but if they don't at least try to bring in another goalie, I'm seriously questioning this front office already.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have said, like, Hextall, had quotes at the end of the year about, like, we believe in Jarry, and like blah blah blah.
What's he supposed to say?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Like, Tim Rutherford said the same thing about Jack Johnson before he bought him out 3 weeks later. So I mean, it's just you're not gonna get like some kind of candid, he blew it. That's not gonna happen. Really, guys, to your point, Tyler, there's really only two things that have happened with this front office. They traded for Jeff Carter, and they traded Jared McCann. That's it. Other than that, nothing has happened, right? So, okay, like I'm willing to see. Like I said, I'm willing to see what happens. I don't know that enough has happened yet for me to like feel concerned about the direction that they're heading or anything like that. I mean, I still think that they've made some shrewdly difficult decisions. I think we're all kind of pleased with the Teddy Bluger result, right? So probably could add that to the list. I know I'm going to say this, like I know for a fact that they did a lot to try to keep Sam Ventura in Pittsburgh. So like there was this sort of like sentiment that was like this, maybe there was this unharmonious. Sam got like a really good offer in Buffalo, like really good, and it's a promotion for him, and it's a logical next step in his career if he wants to be a general manager somewhere. And the Penguins didn't have that ability to do that for him. So I again, I'm just saying, for me, I think that they really did try to keep him here, and I think that it was an amicable parting of ways. I've not spoken to Sam about that. I'm just piecing together things that I know to be true. So I don't know if that helps you guys feel any better, but like I know there was like sort of like the speculation about like, well, did they let Sam go? Did so and so?
Yeah, pushing back against the analytics and
not the case. And like, and I know Katarina Wu is awesome, and she's still here, and still working hard, and that's something that I think people should be excited about too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily like questioning the front office already. Like I'm not already mad at them about anything. It's just I think if they go into the season with the two goalies that they have and they don't try to bring in anybody else, that will be the first like big red flag. Like what are they thinking?
Yeah.
Because
I think we'll have a lot more answers in just like a week or so.
Not even, maybe even sooner than that after the draft this weekend. So,
I mean, you brought up John Gibson. Would that even be a realistic possibility? Like, what would you have to even give up to bring in a guy like that? Because he also has a $6.4 million cap hit, I believe. So he's not going to be someone easy to.
Well, once you see these goalies get what they get paid in free agency, that's not going to sound that bad.
I know. So there's that, right? But then like there's the element that like they're like I don't get the impression they want to get rid of him. Like I think that they're like staving off this rebuild in Anaheim and saying like trying to ignore a little bit of like reality is there, and I think it probably would cost. You're basically trying to convince them to take back Marcus Pettersson as well, which is never an easy thing to do. So I don't know. It would be tough. Let's put it that way. And they're not going to help you on a salary perspective either. So you got to make sure you have the room for that.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, would you have to give up a player like Jake Gensel to get John Gibson?
No, that's too much. That's like over the line for me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but like Jason Zucker is a name I'd throw in there for sure.
Not that you would. Like, would Anaheim be like, okay, we want Jake Gensel, or something like that?
Probably a bridge too far. I mean, I think they're probably going to be in a position where they want draft asset capital that we don't have, that the Penguins are missing completely. So that's probably the biggest piece of it.
And Hextall probably isn't the best to try to negotiate if you want draft capital.
I think that's the one thing that they have definitively said that they, would like to hang on to in addition to Sam Poland and Nathan Legare.
I think we'd be looking at this expansion a lot differently if we felt like he'd be willing to part with assets to make sure they took somebody. Like, I feel like that's the first indication of how close to the vest he wants to keep this draft capital.
In his defense, though, on that one, Smitty, I think that you haven't seen much of that at all just because the asking price from Seattle. Like, Ron Francis, I think, saw what happened, and he's been very public about this, but he saw what happened with the last, expansion draft and is now asking for an arm and a leg to execute those deals. They have not existed up to this point. I think, if we think about some of the absurd crap that happened, like people like basically begging Las Vegas to take Shea Theodore, which is insane.
Yeah.
It's like nuts, right? And even to some extent, like the Penguins begging him to take Marc-Andre Fleury is slightly insane despite their overall circumstance. So I just think that Francis he has a solid plan in place, guys. And if you want him to deviate from it, you're gonna have to pay for it. For him, you're gonna have to pay very dearly for him to make a decision that he does not want himself to make.
Talking about this makes me think: how differently would all this be if Jim Rutherford was still the GM of the Penguins? Like, would the
how we said about we said about Jari's exit, how like Hextall was still complimentary of him instead of believing him. Yeah, that wouldn't have happened with Rutherford. He'd be like, he's gone. We'll see him tomorrow.
We'll probably be looking at like Brian Russell on the protected list. Like, what is going on here?
Brian Rust have been traded already.
All right, you've gone already. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would have hated that.
We're already coming up on an hour. Tyler, I know you wanted to talk to Jesse a little bit about the expansion draft, or sorry, not the expansion draft, the entry draft. Before we wrap things up, of course. I mean, we mentioned Jesse in terms of the Penguins, but he also covers the entry draft for the Athletic as well. So we got to talk a little bit about
that. And I know you have your draft endorsement coming out tomorrow. I saw you tweet about that. So everybody go check that out. But I'm hoping if we can just get a smaller preview of that on this show beforehand.
Yeah, it's tough to predict who's going to be available at 58 ever. Right, like, period. I think it's even harder this year because this draft doesn't have like star power, but I think it's got 3-round depth, and I think that there's an ability for teams, crazy teams like Ottawa, to go out and address wacky needs that they don't really have and take players that are way off the board, and open up the opportunity for the Penguins to get like a first-round talent at 58. So I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. The names that I have, 2 names I'll give you guys. They're both defensemen. There'll be larger write-ups on them tomorrow, but they're both from abroad. One of them is Alexei Haimosalami. I like Haimosalami so much. Here's the thing, like when you watch him, you get like very like Chris Letang vibes from him, and like I don't mean that to like say he's the next Chris Letang, but they're both small defensemen, 5'11".
Like 58.
Right?
I mean,
yeah, right. Haimosalami, I think, is the same kind of motor Letang has, in that like sometimes he's a fourth forward, and that's good and bad. You know, like he constantly is pressing the play. I think he deviates from the plan a lot to run the breakout himself. I've got video of some end-to-end goals that he scored last year. It's a project pick, right? He's same size, just like 5'11", 170. Probably not a player that's going to impact your organization in like a 2 or 3 or 4 year window, but that's kind of the way Letang's career went. You know, like spent his time at Val d'Or, went to the AHL, you know, graduated up the ladder. I just get similar vibes. You know, he's a puck moving defenseman that's got a really good shot, can run a power play, and loves to get involved up ice. And I think his skating is so good that it you know, he's not the most physical player. You know, didn't look great on the penalty kill, but his gap control was fantastic. And at 5'11", you wouldn't normally think of like a 5'11" player being up in your face, but it's his stick. He's got such an active stick that is really annoying when you combine his mobility, his foot speed, and all those elements of his game that allow him to move so quickly with that active stick. It's just like a kind of a nightmare to have to play against that. The other defenseman that's kind of the polar opposite of him is Kirill Kirsanov. I love this kid. He is a Brian Dumoulin clone. I'm telling you right now, they are the same player. They don't have any flash at all. They're big. When he's 6'2", 198 pounds. He played 20 minutes a night on a second pairing in the KHL. That is, as an 18-year-old kid, you don't shake a stick at that. That is not something that happens over there, right? Like, that's rare. Fine skater. Nothing remarkable about his game offensively. His breakouts are mostly 5-foot passes. But man, like, you just can't skate the puck in on this kid. Physical, but mobile, the same way that Dumoulin is. You know, he doesn't have that outstanding one element of his game that makes you talk about him on the way home. But it's the lack of flash, and he's got 2 more years on his contract in the KHL. So you know the earliest impact you're getting out of him is at least once that deal is over with. But to me, he's just so sound. And to me, the definition, guys, of like what it means to be a two-way defenseman in 2021. Like, it's not about standing in front of your own net and bopping people over the head anymore. You know, like the Hatcher days are over. Like, this is what it means to be. You have to be mobile. You have to be able to skate. He's got all that. He's got a super inaccurate cannon from the point. The typical Brian Dumoulin stuff. You know, like, they're just very similar to me. And I don't think that the Penguins have a prospect like that in the system. I got some forward names, some centers in there I won't spoil the beans on for tomorrow as well. But those 2 defensemen to me are both very, very, very realistic possibilities. I think they're going to fall right into the Penguins' lap. And I think they're night and day, right? 2 totally different players. Pick your poison.
So if they're both available at 58, who would be your preference between the two?
I'm taking Kirsanov because I just can't get past the fact that this kid played 20 minutes a night in the KHL. Like that to me is
At 18 years
down
old.
at 18 years old. Like that is not, even if Genny Malkin didn't do that, like he, as a young kid in Magnitogorsk, like he probably maxed out at 14 at most nights.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just so impressive to me. And then you need big minute eaters like that in your team. You think about Brian Dumoulin and how like Mike Sullivan really has the confidence to deploy him in any fashion. I look at Kirsanov as a kid that not babysits, but like, you know what I mean? Sits back for POJ. Like, let POJ run wild. We're going to put this 6'2", 200-pound monster back here that can also skate, and you do whatever you want. Like, this kid can cover the gap for the entire blue line. And that's kind of the vibe you get out of him. I mean, I like Haimasami's flash, and I'm kind of a mark for that kind of player. But the Kirsanov, that's too much for me to get past. He's just kind of like a black hole along the wall. So
what you're telling us is if they pick either of those guys, we're going to be basically replacing our top two defensemen.
No, I'm going full. Let me tell you guys a story. I made I did a draft ranking that I put on. I wrote it in a Word document and converted it to a PDF in 2008 or 2009. It was like one of the first public ones I ever did. And in each section, I put like NHL comparable. And then afterwards, people would like send me tweets like, "You said this was the next Joe Thornton," and I was like, "I'm never doing this again." And then this year I was like, I'm rescinding the rule. I'm letting it go. I'm letting it fly. Let's just run wild with it, Let's go. Like Jesse said, this is the next Wayne Gretzky. Let's do it.
All right, well, Jesse, I only have one more question for you just because we've taken up a lot of your time already. I just wanted to touch on these guys, and you mentioned it a little bit. So Sam Poulin, Nathan Legare, do you think that the Penguins losing Jared McCann and potentially losing another winger, would that escalate their timetable for an arrival at the NHL?
No. Each one of them individually has things that have to get sharpened before they play here. They were both exceptional. For Valdor, they were phenomenal. They did not lose because of either one of those, but they kind of got Tristan Jarry, if I want to be honest with you. Like, that's basically what happened to them in the conference finals at that. They were just great. They have anything left to learn there. For Sam Poulin, it's going to be adjusting to the pro game at the skating level and learning about whether or not, and we'll find this out at camp probably. The reality is he didn't make that WJZ team because of his skating. Writing's on the wall for him. Like, that's what he has to fix to get to this level. And he's got everything else. Like, all the other tools are there, but turning radius is too long. Can't start and stop well. He's got to clean that stuff up. And for Nathan Legare, I don't know what it is. I think the problem with him is you don't get anything out of him by playing him in the bottom six. You just don't. And there's probably some refinement that that needs to be. I have a hard time judging this, guys. So much of being a wing, a scoring wing, and playing defense is are you present? Did you go in the defensive zone? Like, if you did, that's really like 60% of the job. Like, let's be honest, it's not difficult to be a winger and play defense. But that was a problem for him, and it wasn't so much because he couldn't do it or didn't understand it, but he played on a really bad team before getting traded, right? So if he wanted to score, he had to cheat up ice. He had to do it. He was not going to go 1-on-4. He doesn't have that level of speed. He's a James Neal kind of player, So were those bad habits? I don't know that I call them that. I think that's lazy writing. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think if you watch that and you walk away with that impression, you're lazy, because there's so many other things that were happening. Like, he was doing, one, what I think his coaching staff encouraged him to do, and two, what needed to be done for him to be able to score goals, which is what his primary function is on the ice. I think when he got to Val d'Or, any defensive concerns you had, you could basically just have flushed down the toilet, because that was a really good, just like machine-like hockey club that washed away a lot of the concern you had. But that's a very brief time of his junior career. We're talking about weeks of his junior career as opposed to this whole other sample that we have. So who knows? I just don't think that. I don't know. I don't think he's got the pop to earn a spot right at account. I don't think it would hurt him to play in the AHL for a little bit. I do think, guys, both of those players will play in the National Hockey League. Whether it's one game or not. They will play in the National Hockey League. I don't know if it'll be this year, but I think both of them have really strong individual talents that set them apart. For Poland, it's the size and the hands in front of the net. For Legary, it's just a shot. Those elements for them alone could get them game time.
Cool. Yeah, I've seen prospects. I've seen people a little bit down on those two as of late.
I think
Twitter.
It's fair to be. I think it is fair to be. Yeah, I 100%. I wouldn't fault anybody for that. And I don't think that I don't even think that it's so much that they're not panning out. I think that they're exactly where they probably were when we drafted them. To be completely frank with you, this is probably what the accurate trajectory for both of these players is. I think what happened is at various points of their development, they outplayed their trajectory for brief periods of time. And I think that it probably got a little bit of the hype train going. On that subject, guys, I'm going to throw one more thing at you before we go. Do you remember the old defenseman Stefan Robidas? Yeah. His son, Justin Robidas, it played in Val d'Or with Legary in Poland, and he's really good. He's only 5'8". I don't personally care about that. Doesn't matter to me. I never watched him.
Is he a defenseman?
No, he's a wing. So keep an eye on him too, because the Penguins have a penchant in the past for drafting players that they got a really good look at because their other prospects played with them. And I think, you might kind of remember they drafted every defenseman out of the Portland Winterhawks for like 5 years. So it could be like another potential one of those situations.
You mean is that pick 58?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a second rounder too. Yeah.
You mentioned he's 5'8". That's another stigma in hockey that needs to go. That height matters. Like
Cole Caulfield.
So many people hate on Cole Caulfield. I'm like, why? He's a good player.
Braden Point.
They're just short, but they
we are completely fine with you hating on Kalen Addison though. So
fair. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, Jesse, we can't thank you enough for joining us again. You've only been on one time before this, right?
Yeah.
The second time
so. Yeah, this is the second time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a third at some point in the near future, hopefully. Once we get some of this stuff figured out and see the direction for sure this front office is going to take, we got to get you back on and talk about whatever that might be.
Look forward to it, guys. This is always fun, and enjoy the show all the time. I'm always secretly watching you, so behave yourselves.
We appreciate
All right,
it.
Jesse.
Go get yourself some sleep.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man. Take care.
Yep.
Oh, let's just leave it like this.
Well, that was Jesse Marshall from The Athletic. Go check out his stuff there. He's the best. He knows more about NHL prospects and analytics than I probably ever will. So,
for him to just pull out that Robidas thing at the end.
Yeah. This guy, we
story stuff about Jari, that's interesting with the hockey. Yeah.
He just knows so much about NHL prospects. You got to respect the hustle.
We are doing the show later than normal, so we're already getting pretty late here. So we got to definitely do Three Rivers Rapid Response before we wrap that up.
Exactly. Emphasis on rapid.
So this is Three Rivers Rapid Responses brought to you by Viget. Download the Viget app using the word Crowworthy when you sign up. That's CROWWORTHY. Reach out to us, let us know that you're in, and we will get you in our group. Ranks the leaderboard for the month from top to bottom. If you win, if you're at the top of the leaderboard, you get some extra coins for doing so. I'll start out. This has been a hot topic on Twitter. Actually, was recently like a trending thing within our friend group. First video game that you were addicted to.
That I was addicted,
and I say addicted to. Like you were at school when you were like, once I get out of school, I already know what I'm doing.
RuneScape.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay.
So
I never got into RuneScape.
Yeah, so back in, and you can ask Anthony, he can attest to this. Back in like third grade, I think we started playing RuneScape, and we literally played every single day when we got home. And it was funny because we didn't have a way to communicate, like we didn't have Discord or anything, so we literally just type and chat to each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, we played RuneScape every day, probably for like, I don't know, so sometime in middle school, I was always playing RuneScape. I played other games too as well. I was really addicted to Call of Duty when that came out. I loved playing like Halo, NHL. I had a lot of games I played a lot, but the first one that I would say I was actually addicted to was RuneScape. And the best part of it was we had a kid that we went to elementary school with named Cameron Fullerton, and his grandma paid for my RuneScape membership account and paid for my friend Anthony's RuneScape membership account. So we got to go into the members servers and the members part of the world because his grandma paid for our accounts. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, RuneScape, I was definitely addicted to at an early age. I was probably like 7 years old.
Okay. Yeah, let's just go 1.
Yeah. So baseball stadium you want to visit the most that you have not been to.
Okay, well, I've only been to a couple, so it's between two. It's between either San Diego or San Francisco. We'll go with San Diego.
San Diego, Petco.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say like it. And actually, it's funny because San Fran is the better team, even though San Diego is the more exciting team. That really like shouldn't play into it, but like at least this year, and I don't know how long it's going to last, especially if it's in the near future, it would definitely be San Diego for me. Like everything that's going on out there is just awesome.
Yeah, I was at San Diego 2 years ago, so I can attest that's a great ballpark. But yeah, you're next.
Speaking of ballparks, I was like worried that you were going to kind of ask this one. So you can, we all love PNC Park. We say it's, with the scenery taking into that account, it's the best ballpark in the majors. But if you could change one thing about it, the team is not an answer. What would it be that you would change?
The Pirates charity sign in right field. It's an eyesore to look at.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an eyesore to look at. I don't need it there. I know a lot of people would probably say the width of the concourses.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going to say.
But the thing I will say to that, we don't really have enough people at games to make that big of an issue.
Hey,
so
October 2024, we're going to be complaining about it.
I know.
So.
We will be complaining about it then. But as of right now, that is not an issue. So I will say the Pirates charity signs. Not the Pirates charity is a bad thing. Put the signs somewhere else. Just don't have it up on the right field above the stands. It's just an eyesore out there.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good enough for me.
All right. So I feel like we've always talked about food on here and during these rapid responses. So what is your favorite fruit?
Oh. It's got to be either bananas or watermelon. I feel like I eat bananas more often, so I'll say banana.
That's a good one. I mean, I feel like fruit is like picking your favorite food is hard, but especially for me, if someone asks me what's my favorite fruit, it's really hard to like just pick one because I eat so many of them.
I'd say the four that I eat the most: banana, watermelon, grapes, apples. But I eat bananas more than anything else. Like sometimes that's my breakfast. Like,
all right, bonus rapid response. What's your favorite type of apple? Mine's a Honeycrisp. So,
I would say probably just a Granny Smith, but I mean any type of apples, man. Like I'll eat any type of apple.
I was just curious if you had an answer. That's it.
Okay, so last one. I feel like Jesse kind of gave us his thoughts on what this might be.
Okay.
Do the Kraken make the playoffs in year one?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah,
think
he said. Did you hear him say that about the model has like 95 points?
Yeah, I heard him say that. I'm gonna say no, and not because I don't think they're gonna have a bad team, or I think they're gonna have a bad team. I just think that I think that they're not gonna catch lightning in a bottle like Vegas did. Vegas literally just caught the whole league off guard. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that GMs are going to make a lot of the mistakes that they did towards the Vegas expansion draft. They're going to be more wary this time. So I think Seattle, I keep saying Vegas. I said it in the notes earlier today. I think Seattle will still have a decent team at the end of the day, but I don't think they're going to be a playoff team right away.
Okay.
I think they're probably going to be closer to what we all thought Vegas was going to be until they went and lost in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right, so my last one is also hockey related, and we touched on this a lot with Jesse. So I want a definitive yes or no. Do you think the Penguins will add a goalie before the start of the 2021 season?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if we're leaving that open for interpretation, where I don't have to name who the goalie is.
No, just
I think they're definitely going to add a goalie.
Do they add a goalie? Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Ron Hextall was a former goalie. He knows the importance of having goaltending. Like, he can say whatever he wants about Tristan Jarry. He can still have faith in him. That's not even That's not even the conversation to me. I don't think that the conversation is the jury or is the book completely written on Tristan Jarry. I think it's what happens if that happens again.
Exactly.
Like,
That's why I said to Jesse is that, listen, the Jared McCann thing, it's questionable in my own personal opinion, but it's not the end of the world for this front office. If you go into next season not touching the goaltender position, or at least not trying to touch the goaltender position, if you try to get in a bidding war with someone for a free agent and you lose, or if you try to make a trade, falls through, whatever, I can live that you tried, but if you don't even attempt, that is the immediate red flag for me, because after that after that playoff series, I don't know how you can look at the team and be like, yep, that is the sole biggest problem, because we don't know if that's going to be a repeat offender. Like you said, I have trust in Tristan Jarry that he could bounce back from this. I mean, we don't know what he's going to be. Is he going to be the Islanders series goalie, or is he going to be the All-Star form goalie going into the next season? We literally have no idea. But I am not going to bank my entire season off of that hope that he can be that all-star goalie again.
Right. 100%. 100%. Okay, so I think that about wraps things up if you don't have anything else.
Nope. There's a lot of hockey stuff happening soon. I mean, there's a lot of Pittsburgh sports stuff related that's happened. We'll touch on all that later, but hockey, we've got the expansion draft tomorrow. We've got the entry draft, I believe, this weekend or next week, and free agency starts the 28th. So there's a lot going on. It's going to be a lot of fun news for the Penguins in the next few weeks.
Not sure what's going on with us next week. We'll still be doing an episode, just don't know when. Don't know if we'll have somebody on with us or we'll just be the two of us. But anyway, that the following week, same week as Steelers play the Hall of Fame game. Can't believe that's coming up already, but that's awesome. Football is so close to being back. We're going to be doing a collab with the Yinzers. Shout out to Morgan, Samantha James, and Jordan. They're all going to be on here, or I don't know how we're going to do it, honestly. Like, I was just talking with Morgan today about it. We were like, yeah, let's collaborate, and we have no idea how exactly it's going to go down. So, but anyway, stay on the lookout for that. Once again, shout out to Jesse Marshall. Always, every week, we got to give a shout out to Christian at Keats Barbershop. However, there are going to be some changes going on there with the hours. So I've been reading the same ad read for I don't know how long.
A couple years at least.
Yeah. So Tuesday through Friday, his hours will be 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. On Saturday, it will be 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., closed Sunday and Monday. And he is still just appointment only, so you can download the app, The Cut, and that's how you can book your appointments with him. But he is located at 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. I just told you his hours, but every Tuesday he also does $5 off for military personnel, first responders, and nurses. Again, that's Keats Barbershop at 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. So if you are in the area, even if you're not, I know our boy Noah Strackbine, drives all the way from wherever he is to get his hair cut at Christian. That's how good he is. He won't go anywhere else now. Anyways, thanks for listening to this episode of Around the 412. This has been a presentation of Crowworthy, where winners are serving winners coast to coast for sports, gambling, fantasy, and more. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Around the 412. Follow them at Crowworthy Takes. Visit the Pittsburgh City page at crowworthy.com for podcasts just like this one. Blogs. Tyler just wrote a new one about goalies, so go check that out before that gets outdated. And much more. Until next time, we'll see you then.